Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Landrum HR webinar on managing a remote workforce. Let me take a minute to introduce myself. My name is Becky Haynes, and I have over 25 years of human capital expertise. I hold a business degree with a concentration in HR, and I'm certified as a professional in human resources by the HR Certification Institute. I also hold both my certified professional as well as my people analytics credentials through the Society of Human Resources Management. As an 11-year Landrum HR employee, I've had the privilege of working with the staffing, the PEO, and the consulting divisions of the company. I currently hold the position of managing consultant for HRQ, our national human capital consulting firm. Now, prior to joining Landrum HR, I was the director of human resources for the largest behavioral healthcare system in Alabama. There, I led the HR team in the proper execution of the recruitment, employment, benefits, compensation, workers' compensation, and safety disciplines for about 1,000 staff. I am passionate about helping organizations best manage their greatest resource, their people. I am a teacher at heart, that I think you'll see today, and I really enjoy focusing on helping business leaders understand the why behind the what, so that they can have confidence in their business decisions. Today's topic of managing a remote workforce is a timely one. I'd like to start with a poll of our audience. Our poll today is asking the question, what percentage of your employees are currently remote? We have 0 to 25, 26 to 50, 51 to 75, and 76 to 100. I'll give you all just a moment to answer that. And it looks like we have a pretty healthy split between those who have less than 25% and those that are almost at full staff remote. So in that, we also probably have some hybrid working environments as well. So very interesting. As you know, we're all moving very quickly towards remote work if we haven't already. I think we all knew 5 years ago that we would be headed more and more into a remote style working environment, but I don't think we expected to be turbo blasted there during the pandemic. We just weren't fully prepared for the speed at which it was required. And just to be very honest, we had other fish to fry, right? We were trying to keep our businesses afloat. We weren't really concentrating on how the work environment had changed so drastically. But now, as we've been able to collectively lift our heads from the pandemic, we're realizing that being proficient at managing remote employees requires a mental leap, especially for those more traditionally minded managers. Successfully pivoting to virtual work requires that managers be willing to recalibrate how they lead people. Managers have historically relied upon workplace encounters as a means of tracking productivity and dedication. It's also much easier to track moods and address mounting frustrations if you're in a shared workplace. Those business leaders used to monitoring productivity based on workers' desk time and visibly looking at activity levels are finding a shift to remote work just a bit foreign and a little unwieldy. The transition to remote communication removes that personal context that helps us interact with one another. Many employees are also feeling a little out of sorts in the beginning. They're having to adjust as well to significant shifts in their days. If business leaders thought going remote was as simple as sending a worker away from the office equipped with a laptop and a to-do list, they have quickly found out that it's just not that simple. In fact, when the correct procedures and practices are created to support offsite employees, it can have wonderful effects. If the incorrect procedures are employed, it can have terrible consequences, like career stagnancy, isolation, micromanagement, burnout, and even overwhelm. For those employers that are willing to put their energy into learning how to operate effectively in this new way, I will say, I feel like it's been a great clarifying effect on business mindset by challenging some false assumptions regarding work productivity and value that we have had. Now, there's no greater example of this than that common concern that we hear from our clients, which is, Becky, I have a non-exempt remote staff worker, and I don't know how I figure out if they're working or not. How do I prove that my staff are really working? Well, when I hear this, my immediate thought is they don't know how to measure performance because they've always measured time. And in their defense, historically, this has been the norm. Businesses have measured non-exempt staff by the hours that they put in, or what many like to call the butt in seat rule. On the flip side of that, we've also made it clear that exempt staff were measured by the work they accomplished without much regard to the hours that were required. It's as if we took the method of payment via the Fair Labor Standards Act, and we decided that that also looked like a good way to measure productivity. The rulers by which we measured productivity should never have looked so different. We all know people who have been physically present at work, but they're not answering their phone and they're not returning emails timely. But we also know those people that will answer their phone even while watching Johnny play at his Little League game. The thought that someone being physically present would somehow give us the green flag that they were doing their job well is absurd. Yet most companies practice this method of accountability until recently. The old normal created lazy leaders and gave us a false sense of security. Increasing time spent has never been a good business metric. So how do we as leaders get the most out of our remote staff in a healthy and productive way that keeps them engaged while also avoiding burnout? Well, I encourage our clients to have a fully deployed mission with a communicated and supportive amount of measurable outcomes. And then I ask them to wrap that in a respectful culture. So let's dive a little deeper on that. Many of us have spent days, weeks, and even months agonizing over defining a company mission. In fact, just the mention of the creation of your mission statement might still give you the willies. If we're being honest, it is not a fun process. But as exhausting as that process can be, the job is not done once it's on your website or your letterhead. It's not done once you've rolled it out to staff. Remember, a solution is worthless unless and until it creates business value. And honestly, being on your letterhead or being framed and put on your walls, it might be pretty, but it's not bringing you value. Full missional deployment is only reached when each of your staff is using the mission as the litmus test for what work to engage in and how to engage in that work. The events of the last 2 years really underscore the importance of a fully deployed mission. I mean, let's face it, there are many good things vying for your employees' time, but good doesn't necessarily translate into what's right for your business. If you have staff making decisions based on what's good, but it doesn't align with the mission, it simply isn't right. You no longer have the luxury of overhearing conversations or stopping by their desk to see where their focus lies. So to ensure your staff is all moving in the same direction towards your goals, they need to be empowered to make decisions on what's right for their position's efforts by holding it up to the mission statement. Now, your mission statement should be something easy to say and easily remembered. As leaders, we should set the tone in our meetings. When discussing new projects or current issues, we should be stopping and asking out loud, does this fulfill our mission? We as leaders are the igniter of that engine. We can't expect our staff to be internally asking that question when too many things are vying for their attention if we haven't helped them build that muscle. At a previous company I worked for, we created the mission of helping people overcome life's challenges. It was simple, it was short, and it was easily remembered, but it still was not good enough. We had to stop meetings and conversations about projects or goals, and we had to ask out loud, is this helping people overcome life's challenges? Not only was it helpful for us as leaders to realign priorities, but over time, we started seeing our employees, without any leadership present, asking each other that same question to isolate where their energies needed to be. It worked amazingly well to assure that we were all rowing in the same direction. The hard part of this process, though, is that last 10% of full deployment. It is so alluring to wrap a mission project up and it's initially rolled out to staff and we feel like we're done. But let's face it, although it may be new to your employees, you've been drowning in it for months and you're tired. But this last 10% is what makes the difference between a floundering company and a winning company. Winning companies push through and complete the project in order to gain full deployment. It was important before the onset of remote work, but I promise you, now that your employees are working in a more isolated fashion, it is going to be the difference maker for your company. This is all about giving your employees the tools to make decisions on a day-to-day basis that align with the journey the company has mapped out. Another huge element to that is outcomes. As crazy as it sounds, most company leaders cannot actually tell you what factors lead to their success. They can tell you when they're financially successful, but they're simply looking at the effect of success and not the cause. To repeatedly succeed in business, you must drill down to know what causes growth in your business. Now, if you thought mission creation was a difficult process to go through, hold on, folks. This is even more difficult. But you needed to start measuring your business input and your outcomes yesterday, and you need to be doing it continually moving forward. You'll see business drivers come to the forefront when you do that. And once you have those business drivers identified, communicate them to your staff. Let them know how those drivers will be measured for the health and well-being of the company. If happy clients are a key driver, maybe a net promoter score needs to be of great importance to your staff. If timely production is a key driver, a production volume metric might be in order. Now, this is not to micromanage, but it is to educate. It's to get your staff's creative juices flowing on how to improve and how to offer some additional on-demand feedback for your staff. Now, these drivers and outcomes they create should be a part of every meeting. It should be a part of every performance review and every decision made. It's easy to forget the other side of the equation here. Just as we as leaders are saying, how do I know that my staff are working? Staff are asking, how do I feel secure that my leaders know I'm adding value? And outcomes is a great way to do that. It's critical that we as leaders start focusing on outcomes and not activity. I don't really care that an employee is busy. I care that they're effective. This includes those that are working in the office as well. I mean, in fact, your measurable outcomes should be the same for both sets of employees. When you allow the focus to be singularly driven on outcomes, it's going to increase engagement and empower your employees. Clearly defining the goals and the desired results allows employees to develop a plan of execution and enhances creativity and ownership. Now, it's important that you set clear remote work productivity standards. Now, some productivity standards are going to vary with the job. Others may be standard across the company. A company-wide policy may be that all customer emails get answered by the end of the day, or that everyone's available for meetings and calls from 9 to 5 within a certain time zone. Individual standards must be analyzed and documented, even in an informal way. For example, you in your remote team may decide that any software developer assigned a project must deliver code ready to be tested in 5 days. And if a deadline's not met, maybe you tell them you need 48 hours of notice. Meanwhile, if you're working in a call center employee may need to resolve 10 client calls an hour while ensuring there's no crying babies in the background. A recruiter might need to conduct 20 phone interviews and fill 5 positions a month. While some managers may see documentation of productivity standards as extra effort, it will help them spot trends that need to be addressed. For instance, after 90 days of tracking a call center employee's work, you may discover the need to extend customer service hours or identify a bottleneck that impacts productivity. But though you're looking at productivity, do not allow this to pull you into the trap of micromanaging. In a remote environment, it's far more difficult to micromanage people than when you were physically together, but that's actually a good thing. You shouldn't have been looking over your team's shoulders while they were in the office to begin with, so you don't need to be doing it while they're remote. Regular one-on-one check-ins help managers avoid micromanaging while still enabling them to keep a pulse on employees and provide them with an opportunity to ensure feedback goes both ways. Trust that if they're communicating clearly and meeting goals and deadlines, your employees are being productive and doing their jobs effectively. Now, things will go wrong. Sometimes the best plans just don't work out. Mistakes are made, deals fall through. It's just a part of work. The concern with remote work is that since mistakes may not be as visible, employees may choose to keep it out of the light. But it really will depend on how you respond when mistakes happen. Communicate to your staff that owning their mistakes is crucial as a part of a team. You need to emulate this quality yourself as well. When you make a mistake, share it openly with the team. Be comfortable in your own skin. Remember, you aren't the leader because you're the smartest. Nothing healthy and strong ever grows in the dark. So team members will make mistakes. Allow them to make mistakes and allow them to learn from each other's mistakes. This gives the team the ability to openly offer suggestions on how to do things differently for a successful outcome the next time. People usually learn their greatest lessons one of two ways. Either one, by making their own mistakes. I certainly have my fair share of those. Or two, by watching others. A culture of openly discussing mistakes can make a huge positive impact by allowing the entire team to learn more quickly and therefore lowering the learning curve. Your role is to remain positive and solution-oriented. I am a business mentor in our community, and last year I was introducing the concept of failing forward to my mentees. One mentee in particular spoke and said, Becky, the company I'm currently working at is the first company where failing was ever considered acceptable. And I honestly don't know how I feel about that. It feels weird. So I asked her a few questions. I said, did you fail at your previous companies? And she nodded her head, yes, she had failed. And then I said, did you fail less at those companies than you do now? And she said, no. I said, so the only difference between the companies is that one company you felt the need to hide it. And in your current company, you're now able to share it with everyone so that they know what doesn't work, they learn from you, and they don't make that same mistake themselves. So my next question was, which company do you think is going to grow faster? And that was her aha moment. You see, we have all been pre-programmed with how to do business by what society has held up as the norms. And now that we've had this great disruptor to our business, it's causing us all to step back and say, was that really ever the way to handle things? Unfortunately, I'm seeing more and more good performers being overloaded with work in a remote environment. Since we as leaders aren't physically seeing the signs of exhaustion on our star performers' faces, we're not recognizing it until it's too late. Many of those good employees are being lost in the Great Resignation because they've been under a crushing weight of work and they weren't even able to enjoy their off time anymore. With everyone working remotely, it's often difficult for business leaders to assign workload appropriately and ensure workers have equal amounts of work going on. It's tempting to overload your star performers because it's kind of like a set it and forget it, right? I can assign this job and I can forget about it because I know they'll rise to the occasion. But that really doesn't benefit you because that is a temporary fix that unfortunately will be regulated soon enough by means of resignation letters on your desk. Overworked and overlooked employees may be less likely to voice concerns when they feel overwhelmed because they feel vulnerable working from home as no one is actually witnessing the time they're spending. Try not to assign too much to people too soon and make sure to leave those channels of communication open so they can voice concerns and talk through tasks if needed. And that's why making sure you're still getting together is important. I think there's a misnomer out there that remote means cheaper. Budgets do play an important side note when talking about remote workers. Some business leaders may assume that instituting remote work and cutting office space by 50% equals a 50% reduction in the expense of housing employees in a traditional office. However, the formula isn't so straightforward. Yes, your company will probably spend less on physical office space, but those savings are likely to be spent elsewhere, depending on what your remote work environment looks like. For instance, your travel budget will most likely increase. You'll be bringing remote workers from other states to the main office routinely, allowing for more conferences to not only advance the knowledge base of your staff, but to make sure that they're building their network and getting their much needed interpersonal interactions. This is a part of setting up your team for productivity. Recognize that their brains and their hearts will need to be re-energized with knowledge building and people interaction for them to be their best selves. Communication has always been important, but it is the key to success when working with remote teams. It's critical to gather input from all members and to know what each person's working on. Remember, when you're working side by side, there's a ton of small and quick ways that we have communication happen that make up the whole of our interactions. I mean, can you imagine going into your physical office and shutting the door and only communicating with everyone via email? You would miss so much. And yet, that's what many businesses are asking their remote employees to do. One way in which many remote teams can overcome this is by creating a dedicated place for communication, whether among employees in the same department or freelancers working on the same project. An internal team communication tool like Slack can allow for communication to come across on many channels. Future employees could also see those previously asked questions and learn. No matter what tool you decide to use, as long as there's a way to foster two-way communication and it's a quick way and an informal way, remote workers won't feel quite as isolated. So the big question is, do your employees operate well remotely? That seems like a silly question to ask after the fact, but it's important that we understand that some employees are highly self-motivated and others simply are not. It may be that they just never had the experience behind them to exercise that muscle. Plus, let's be real, there are many distractions at home, from the dishes to the laundry, other family members there. It's much easier, even for the best of us, to get sidetracked when working remotely. You need to make sure that you're offering training, tools, and support to your staff when it comes to time management. They may just need some ideas on structure. In a non-remote work setting, there was likely structure already in place, from set office hours to set break and lunch times. You may offer staff the option of using a time tracking software. Again, not in an effort to play Big Brother, but for them to better get to know the ebbs and flow of their own work, how they best work, and how efficient they are. Again, I can't stress enough, unless you're billing time to a client, this is not for micromanaging. Their outcomes should be their measurement. But this is a great tool for them to learn more about themselves and hold themselves accountable and see if there's any needed changes. It's kind of like a food diary when you're dieting. A time tracker can make you more aware of where your hours are going. You can train on different project management techniques as well. The Eisenhower matrix is a great one out there if you have staff that need to know which project should take priority. Or there's the Pomodoro cycle, where you have your staff set their timer for 25 minutes at a time. They work intensely for 25 minutes, and then they allow themselves a 5-minute break to stretch and just have a little bit of a break. Allow them to pick what works best for them, as it really should be just the outcomes alone that you're concerned about. And while we're on the subject of time management, let's talk about all the meetings that your staff are being invited to. No, it is not your imagination. The meetings have increased exponentially since people started working from home. I hear all the time, Becky, if I could just stop attending meetings, I might actually be able to get my work done. The reason this is a natural reaction to working remote is simple. People used to be able to stop by your office, and if you didn't look busy, they'd pop their head in and ask a quick question. Now that people can't tell if you're busy or not, in an effort not to disturb you, a meeting on your calendar is now the equivalent to them stopping by your office to see if it's a good time to talk. But unfortunately, most of our meeting invites have minimums of 30-minute increments. This is one way that we as leaders can help redefine communication for our remote teams. Encourage them to use chat features as a new way of sticking their head into someone's office. Make sure that everyone understands that if someone doesn't immediately chat them back, they may be in a meeting or on a call, and that's okay. It's the same as if you'd stop by their physical office and realize they were busy. Also, make sure that your community calendar, if you like we use Microsoft Outlook here, make sure that it's set to default to 15-minute increments. That way, if someone has just a few questions, they can go into the meeting with the assumption that it's only a few minutes rather than consuming a 30-minute time span. Your staff needs to know that not everything needs to be a meeting. Does your team have the tools to reach their outcomes on a remote basis? Now, it's going to be different for each company and even each position within a company. However, it can be anything from Wi-Fi access to a laptop, the right number of monitors, a camera, a printer, things like that. There was a company I worked with last year that had a largely remote population, and they prepared for some extensive training with their teams. They brought in special speakers, and they were really hoping for a lot of interaction and growth from their efforts. They were highly disappointed when there just didn't appear to be much engagement over the Zoom training. Well, one huge reason was that we found out that 3/4 of their staff attending didn't have cameras. They couldn't read facial expressions. They were more likely to be distracted looking at emails coming in and other things than if they had been on camera for all to see. Unfortunately, the company learned a pretty valuable lesson. You have to have the proper tools to get the proper outcomes. And finally, one of the tricks I've seen employed that I really like is setting up a voluntary accountability buddy program. Once again, this is a tool to add value to their work life. It is not a tool to micromanage. If you micromanage through this, I promise you, you'll see engagement drop like a rock. But the buddy program is simply this. They volunteer into the program, and one person is assigned to another peer staff member. And they're assigned for a certain period of time. Maybe you choose 3 months, 6 months, and they'll meet together for a few minutes before their work day gets started or before the work week begins. And essentially just share with one another, hey, listen, if by the end of the day or the end of the week I accomplish these things, I will consider myself successful. They share that with each other, and then at the end of that day or the end of the week, they get back together and they see how each other did. It's a fun way to help motivate them. It's not something that needs to be managed up to their leaders. It's not something that they need to be graded on. It's just another interactive way to help them stay aligned and also help them build some strong alliances within the company. It's kind of like a workout buddy. When you have someone that will be checking up with you, you have a stronger desire to attack your goals. You can have a fully deployed mission and you can have clearly measured outcomes. But in order to retain and engage, they have to be wrapped in a great culture. Culture is the spark that alights the mission and outcomes. Company culture takes time to cultivate. Whether you want to create a professional company culture or a team that's known for being fun and energetic, it'll take more concentrated effort to develop in a remote team than in an office. Sometimes culture is shaped in an office without much effort because it just comes about a little bit more organically. But I promise that's never the case for remote teams. Creating a healthy company culture with a remote team that reflects your business's values requires a plan, much like any other project or initiative. It starts from the top with how the manager or business owner interacts with employees. For instance, if you want to foster a culture of open communication, Remote team members need to be able to communicate with everyone, including the CEO, with a virtual open door policy. If you want a company culture that's fun, try scheduling fun get-togethers, maybe gift cards for employees to go bowling together or hosting a virtual movie night. Many leaders think that company culture is rolled out to staff or happens in an event like onboarding or company meetings. But the reality is, culture cannot be created in one event. Culture is not an event at all. Culture is created by 1,000 small decisions made by the leadership of a company so that combined, they convey a whole and complete message. Culture is essentially the personality of the company. Just like someone's personality cannot be defined by one conversation, neither can a company's culture be defined by one initiative. If your workforce has become remote, you're going to have to find new ways and employ some extra effort to arrive to your cultural destination. Maybe you used to have spontaneous office parties. Well, now you might have to send breakfast to your staff by way of DoorDash. Increasing employee engagement and productivity while still attaining work-life balance should be the key emphasis for leaders of remote teams. It can be easy for an employee to overwork themselves when they work remotely, as working from home can sometimes feel like they never really leave work. They can easily feel like every hour in a day is a potential work hour. So if they're behind on a project, they can expend the extra hours in their day that they would have otherwise spent with their family or relaxing or exercising, actually working. This, after a while, is a dangerous practice as they start to feel burned out and pretty quickly can pass 12 hours of the day working. Encourage your team to take breaks. I found it interesting when we went remote that staff would almost be apologetic that they had to run out to the post office in the middle of the day, something they would have never thought twice about in the office. Or, if I caught them on the phone and they were in their kitchen eating. Again, we believed in lunch breaks before, we still believe in lunch breaks. We have to start resetting our brain here. Most of us are no longer working in crisis mode. We can't keep pushing ourselves or our staff to the same levels that we did in the beginning of the pandemic. You can help your employees combat this. Schedule walking meetings where no one has to be on camera, but they can put in their earbuds and go for a walk around the neighborhood while talking with their colleagues. The sun and the fresh air can help energize and refresh spirits. Encourage them to stop working at 5 every day and encourage them to ignore the urge to check messages and assignments all evening. Ask your team to unplug at the end of the day, and the hard part is you need to lead by example. One of the things a colleague shared with me about a year ago was that one of the new stressors for her working remotely was that she would feel so good about leaving the office at the end of the day. She would have her to-do list completely checked off and feel very accomplished, and then she'd wake up the next morning and have another dozen emails waiting on her with requests. She no longer had the satisfaction that came with coming to work the next day feeling accomplished, like she could start in a good position. She said, I always feel like I'm behind. And this is simply because others are working all night, and so the office really is never shutting down. One company I work with has really cracked down on this, and I love what they've done here. They have requested that their leaders, if they feel the need to work in the evenings, schedule emails that they send to hit the recipient's inbox the following morning and not during the evening hours. That's so respectful of their employees. And let's face it, when you're sitting on the couch watching a Disney movie with your family and you glance down at your cell phone and your boss has just sent you an email, your stress level goes back into work mode. Employees need mental breaks in order to give their best at work. Consider hardwiring some things into your protocol to ensure that that happens. It's more important now than ever. One of the biggest challenges to working remotely is the lack of forced interaction you have with people on a day-to-day basis. Without having an office where you need to share pleasantries with your coworkers or your boss or even your clients, you need to find alternative methods of socializing with people on your own time. If your employees aren't finding ways to socialize, this will impact them emotionally. Encourage them to get out of their office. If there are local community events that they can represent your company at, ask them to go. Remind your team that they can utilize the Employee Assistance Program if they need to talk to someone. I am a natural introvert, so I didn't think that working from home would bother me that much. But even I felt myself starting to have some depressive tendencies not being around people on a daily basis. Let your staff know that that's a natural response and that there is help. And then have fun with your team. You weren't all work when you were in the office before, and you shouldn't be now. Get to know your colleagues well as people. That's a powerful tool for bonding as a team, and it can really provide a reservoir of strength when your team needs to dig deep and work together. So consider having a virtual coffee break together or a virtual happy hour, anything to bring a little fun back into your day. Communication has always been one of the keys we relay culture through. Understand how your communication may come across depending on the mode of communication you're using. Sometimes it's hard to properly convey tone in an email or a chat. If it's a highly sensitive subject, ask yourself, should I just pick up the phone or should I get a video chat going with this person? Maybe you need to see how they're responding as well. That way it eliminates the risk of them taking your message the wrong way. And along those same lines, although emojis are still unacceptable for communication outside of your organization, they may be just what you need to visually clue someone in that you're being lighthearted or kind when the typed word is what they're receiving. Mistakes happen. We've talked about failing forward, but so do successes. Oftentimes, managers get caught up in being a constructive coach instead of a celebratory one. When an employee succeeds or goes over the top, let them know that you noticed. Recognition can be as simple as a thank you note. I intentionally keep a stack of them visible here on my desk just to remind me to send them. A written word goes an incredibly long way, and it can have a long reinforcement life. Years ago, our company was pretty good at recognizing staff. We held events like ice cream socials to say thank you to the staff, and we had a formal shout out program for staff to be honored. But one day, we all came into the office and every single person had a handwritten note on their desk. The president of the company had taken the time to write every single person in the company and thank them for their work with a personal acknowledgement. Now, at the time, that was close to 200 employees. It was certainly not lost on the staff just how long this must have taken and how he had to know enough about each person to identify their strengths and contributions to the company. For at least 3 years after that, it was common to see most desks still displaying that thank you note. Yeah, it took a lot of time, but it was the recognition that just kept giving. Every day for years, when employees would sit down at their desk, their eyes would glance over to that personal thank you note from the president. And not only would it make them smile, but it would reinforce that they're valued and their work was noticed. However recognition looks like to you, whether it's buying someone a cup of their favorite coffee drink or a shout out during the next team meeting, do not let your days, weeks, and months go by without intentionally honoring those that deserve it. If you have to, put it on your calendar to remind yourself, like, who do I need to honor this week? Who has done an exceptional job? Little acknowledgments can go a long way towards securing buy-in and building a stronger team. Now, be generous with your praise, both for your team and the individual, but always make sure it's sincere because otherwise it will lose its value. Effective recognition can motivate, but it can motivate the recipient and send a very strong signal to other employees of behavior that should be emulated. And not to go down a rabbit hole here, but keep in mind that you never deal with an employment situation in a vacuum. In fact, most one-on-one interactions that you have as a leader have far more impact on the team that's watching how you handle it than they do on that particular individual. One-on-one meetings are critical for morale. While it can seem like a hassle to schedule one-on-one meetings with every remote team member, they make workers feel valued and are an important opportunity to give feedback and know how the work performance is going. Now, my advice is to always start off with asking about something personal so that they know that you care about them as a person first, that their well-being is important to you. I might ask how their kids are doing or inquire about a health issue that they've shared. I might ask them what they did over the weekend, but always start with the person and not the position. Just this morning, there was a great example of that within my own position. Both of my parents are battling COVID right now, and my leader sent me a text regarding a work matter. She started off the text with, "First off, how are your parents?" And then she ended the text after asking me about work with, "That first question was really the most important." Wow. It reminded me that I am more valuable as a person to her than a means to an end. It was powerful for me. Other things you should be discussing when you're in these one-on-one meetings is, how is the employee doing overall? You might think that everything's fine, but remember, you no longer have the luxury of picking up on those little cues that you could pick up in the office. And then you'll need to know, how they're doing as far as how are they identifying and eliminating any bottlenecks in their job duties. You need to discuss plans for the employee's professional development. Remember their need for growth didn't stop just because they went to work remotely. And then this should be also a time for you to answer a range of questions relevant to the employee. I have often said that my best employee meetings usually are with those employees that bring their questions to the table. They should feel comfortable and even encouraged to have their own list of discussion items. Remember, if these meetings aren't scheduled regularly, or if you're continually pushing them off and rescheduling them, it can make remote workers feel out of touch with the company and unsure of where they stand. As a remote leader, you have to be intentional about team building. The lack of interaction that often comes with remote work can also be a detriment to team building, something that is built during meetings, lunches, or even water cooler conversations otherwise. Remote working is best achieved with at least quarterly face-to-face meetings with your team so that you can share experiences and build strong working relationships. These aren't going to happen naturally. You're going to have to pre-plan them. Hold annual retreats, team challenges. You can do cause-related events that give your employees a chance to connect. Even doing things like creating a Dropbox for everyone to put their family vacation photos in can help a team really connect with one another. One of the things I don't think we saw coming before all of this was Zoom fatigue. It takes so much energy to show your emotions over a video, and people are walking away from hours of Zoom calls with muscle strain and headaches. As a leader, it's your job to communicate to your staff when the camera needs to be on. There are some meetings where seeing someone's facial expressions is critical, but it's just as important to clearly communicate with your staff when they can turn that camera off as well. And then finally, remember to listen. The most successful managers are good listeners. Being a good listener communicates trust and respect. Remember, you should be inquiring about workload and progress without micromanaging, but always err on the side of over-communicating. Surveys are often underutilized, but they're a really great tool for listening to your employees. A monthly or quarterly employee net promoter score, for example, could be useful. The net promoter score is an indicator of how likely an employee would be to promote his or her organization to other job seekers. If you need a deeper dive, you could do a pulse survey. That would give you more insight into employee sentiments. It's far better to catch something early than to be surprised by the after effects. Just remember, if you're asking for feedback from employees, you need to be prepared to do something about it. Now, there will always be a difference in how one company handles remote work versus another, but the one thing that should be a part of everyone's formula is intentionality. Now more than ever, we need daring leaders who are willing to try new things, to be open to new ideas themselves, and to innovate. All right, I think we had a few questions come in. Let's see if I can get to them. And if I don't get to all of your questions today, I will certainly follow up with a personal email and make sure that you get your question answered. So the first question that I have here is, any recommendations on best virtual meeting practices? Well, I think like with anything, setting ground rules is essential. Remember, People have been going to in-person meetings for decades. So there were ground rules that were already there that you really didn't have to train on because it just was the way that we did business. They pretty much did that in most companies, and you didn't have to really speak that out loud. But we're still in our adolescence with virtual meetings. So don't assume everyone knows what you consider appropriate or how you want to run your meetings. The biggest difference maker that I see in virtual meetings versus in-person meetings is how seriously distracted people can get. Remember, you can't see someone's hands when they're in their meeting most of the time. You can't see the other screens that they might be looking at or their phone. They could be answering emails, or they might have a spouse or child right outside of the camera view talking to them. So if they're being too distracted, you may want to say, okay, here are some of our rules. You know, we're not going to look at our phone, or we're not going to answer emails, or whatever that might be. You might need to close your door, that kind of thing, when you're in one of our meetings. All right, let's see if we can get to another question. Becky, you mentioned conducting surveys of your remote staff. What kind of questions would you ask? Oh, that's a good question. For remote survey questions, well, first I would say don't inundate them with a whole lot of questions. I mean, this should not be a 20-question survey. This should be maybe a 5-question survey, something really quick so that you're getting everyone involved. Some of the questions I might ask, how do you feel about working from home? Or do you feel connected to your teammates? Maybe how easy is it to reach your teammates and your leaders when you need them? You know, it's not just about are they available to you, but they also need to have their resources available to them. Maybe how satisfied are you with the frequency of communication from your leadership? Or do you feel like you've been able to learn and grow within the past few months since you've been remote? Things like that. But just make sure you're keeping it to probably about 5 questions. I wouldn't go much more than that. All right, let's see if we have time for another one. Another question that came in, it was one thing to take our existing staff and ask them to work remote, but now we're actually hiring people from outside the organization for remote positions. Any suggestions on questions that should be asked before someone is offered a remote position? And that's a great question. Well, I think what you really want to get out of it is, can they work independently? How do they accomplish their goals? How do they communicate? Those have become things that are imperative now for someone to successfully work in a remote environment. So you may want to ask questions like, you know, do they have a history of working remotely? That will tell you a lot. Now, I say that, and I want to follow that up with, just because they haven't worked remotely doesn't mean that they won't be successful. I know lots of people personally that are very successful now working remotely, and 2 years ago they weren't doing it. But if they have a history, that would be good for you to know. Maybe what techniques have they used to stay motivated, focused? How do they create strong engagement with other team members? Might be another good question. How do they manage their time? And then what's their work-life balance look like? Because again, if you're trying to think long-term here, you want someone who's going to stick with you for the long haul, and you're not going to do that if they can't do a good balance of work and life. All right, let's see what other questions we might have here. All right, one question said, what was that last tool you mentioned to break up time? That's the Pomodoro cycle. Pomodoro, I believe. And that's where you just have a 25 minutes of, you know, concentrated time. We're just going to bust it for 25 minutes. And then we're going to give ourselves 5 minutes to get up, get a drink, use the restroom, stretch our legs, that kind of thing. It just helps people to have that concentrated time just to focus and try to put all the distractions away. Let me see what else we have. Okay, another question we got in was, what creative ways have you seen companies allow workers to have fun together on Zoom? That's a great question. So I'll just tell you some things that we've done. We had a Christmas gathering for our department, and we did a scavenger hunt together on the Zoom call to open things up. So right before, so that there was no cheating. Right beforehand, we sent out a list of the things that we would be looking for, and everybody had to present something. So for instance, do you have a Santa hat? Do you have a small Christmas tree? All these things, and we had to present them, and that was a fun way. Our sales team does a virtual happy hour. They do a great job of that. And again, it's all about getting people to open up as people so that they get to know each other individually. Because I promise you, at the end of the day, your team is going to go through crisis at some point. You probably just walked through crisis with the pandemic. And all of that time that you've invested in getting to know one another will help you have each other's backs when it comes down to a crisis situation and you really need to dig deep as a team. All right, great questions. I think we're just about out of time. I do want to thank each one of you for spending time with me today. My hope is that you took one or two things away from this conversation today that you can employ with your team. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Also, please know that there are wonderful resources available to you at landrumhr.com, where our mission is to make the business of people easier.